Happy Monday. How's it going?
It's good. I'm good.
Good. Awesome. Cool. Well, good to have you, Mike. Yeah, so I think before we were just talking about fun things like cycling and kayaking and all this other fun stuff that you do on the side. Seem like a really fun dude. For people who don't know who you are, do you want to give a quick intro?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks very much for inviting me on, Joe. I
Of
really
course.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Mike Ferguson. I'm an industry analyst. I guess I've been in the industry now over 40 years, almost the entire career in data management and analytics. I got a chance, I guess I started out pretty early on as a database administrator, but then in my 20s, I got to co-found a company with a Turing Award winner, Dr.
Oh.
Edgar F. Codd. Of course,
Oh.
Codd invented the relational model, and the SQL language came out of that, and the normalization technique. And the other guy was Chris Date, who wrote all the
Yeah.
books on introduction to database. So I was there for, I guess, about 4 years, and then I got asked to come to the US to become a chief architect of a startup. So I guess what 89, something like that. I went out to well, I joined in the UK organization, but then became chief architect of a startup called Teradata. So worked on massively parallel queries to had a great bunch of guys. We were originally in Los Angeles, and then I think NCR bought Teradata in 1991. I guess I think they spun it out 2008, but I stayed till about 1993, and then a lot of the core team were sort of splintering a little bit and going to other vendors, and I decided, well, I'd I'd go back and spend time in Europe, set up my boutique industry analyst firm. Originally, I set it up with a real great friend of mine who's long retired now. He's a lot older than me. He's a guy who lives in the US. He's a British guy called Colin White. And Colin and I kind of worked together, I guess, for about 10 years. And then we kind of amicably went our separate ways, still stayed great friends. And and then I carried on, kind of. So I've been over 30 years now as an independent analyst and consultant in data management analytics. And every aspect, I guess, I sort of set it up at the beginning of the data warehouse era, and then worked through all of that, and then we had the kind of big bang of big data,
Yeah.
sort of 2010 timeframe or thereabouts, and got heavily involved in that, at least in Europe, and then obviously lived through all of that, and back in 2016, kind of myself and a couple of brilliant events guys, we kind of got together and said, yeah, what about Big Data London? Bill Hammond, who
Oh yeah.
started the show, Bill said, yeah, we kind of need somebody who understands the market to help us. And yeah, he was, we got together, and Big Data London grew and grew and grew, as you saw last
Mm-hmm.
year, or
It's
this year, I
huge.
beg your pardon. Yeah, so it's huge. Yeah, so, and yeah, who knows? Next year could be bigger again. But yeah, my job is, I guess, to try and stay on point, keep everybody on point, and to say, what's going on, what we think the theater should be, and we've got a great team behind it, and then and obviously, that show's still going, and keep me pretty busy, although it's taking almost a whole year to plan for a 2-day event these days because it's so big. But
Yeah.
anyway, going back to my day job, my day job is I'm an independent consultant and an industry analyst, and I do a lot of work with customers on implementing these kinds of stuff, these kinds of projects, and I present all over Europe and in the US, in this space. So yeah, keeps me busy.
That's an interesting history. I had no idea that you had that long of a context in the data field, having worked with Ted Codd and Chris State. Um,
Yeah,
that's
I
impressive.
mean,
Yeah.
Ted, unfortunately, is no longer with us, but
Right.
Chris is still around. I think Chris probably in his maybe early 80s by now, I would
Yeah,
guess. So,
that's interesting.
but yeah, that was phenomenal for me. It was such a learning curve working with two greats,
Yeah,
and in a way, they kind of made you raise your bar as high as you could get it,
I would think so. Yeah.
and yeah, because I was out there. I mean, it's pre-internet days as well, so we were out there. The only way to find out about stuff was to turn up at events, and so when we were presenting, it was monster numbers of people turning up. I mean, it was almost like, dare I say, big day, big day to London. But I
Yeah.
mean, it was great, and I learned a lot working with them, and then, but I also learned a huge amount when I went to Teradata. I mean, especially on the
Yeah.
business side, working with some of the customers that really pushed the edge, with Teradata. That was really great experience too. So
That's super cool. I mean, walk me through this, and this will tie back to the events part in a bit, in the top trends we're going to talk about. But you know, I, again, kind of drawing on your history, right? I mean, it is a storied history. I had no idea, about I think a lot of the massive accomplishments you had back in the day. When you would find out about key trends, was it typically you having to drive those trends with the team that you had, maybe with Chris and Ted Codd, or was it going to these conferences and finding out, about the trends? And then at Teradata, the same kind of question: is it like, because back
well, no,
then it
I
seemed
I
like
I,
everybody
I I
driving
think
trends
I
too.
think when I worked with Chris, I mean, the whole focus was the relational model. I mean, at that
Yeah,
time, at that time, relational was a new kid on the block, and and so people were getting off of, dare I say it, NoSQL databases, because
yeah, I
they
guess that's
were,
they were. Yeah,
yeah, they were IMS and things like that, So
that's funny.
yeah, they were getting off of it, and of course, relational was a new thing, so the focus was very much on about, well, how do we build databases like this? Can you put mission critical systems on relational, and how do you do data modeling? Because obviously the new normalization technique came out of what we did at Cod and Date. And then, so I think the trends were very much, I don't think there was as heavily, moving at a pace. It wasn't a moving at a pace like it is today. I
Right.
mean, we're going back a long time now. I mean,
Yeah.
so but nevertheless, it was a great experience. I mean, obviously, to me, it was more about helping customers practically implement that stuff, and at the
Yeah.
same time, I did some work, with vendors, because vendors were rolling that out. I mean, I guess, Oracle and then IBM came out pretty close to each other. When Oracle launched its first product, then IBM with DB2 came out pretty close
Right.
after it. Kind of strangely, even though Ted was in IBM when he wrote the paper on introduction to shared data banks.
Hmm.
But um, but yes, I mean, so it was more focused around that, and also trying to get, um, I guess, complete implementation, because there was a lot of relational database products emerging that were, let's say, incomplete in terms of
Hmm.
relational model capabilities, which frustrated, I guess, Ted in particular,
Right.
um, but yeah, no, I wouldn't say, most of the time it was really focused on database at that time,
Right.
and then going to Teradata. Well, that was just a phenomenal opportunity. I mean, I couldn't really
Yeah.
turn that down. I mean, to be able to, you know, to work with some really brilliant guys, to take a SQL query and make it run in parallel. Absolutely brilliant team of people there, and many of them, splintered off and went to other vendors and started
Right.
relational database products there too. But yeah, I mean, in those days, people were running on Intel 286 servers,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. I guess is in the museum these days. But yeah, I mean, it was a very exciting time. You know, I guess still, most companies still dominated by transaction processing systems,
Yeah.
and still kind of convincing people about data warehousing was still a tough sell, I think, and going down that road, was still, but it started clearly gathering steam in the 90s, and
Mhm.
really started moving. But there was definitely deviations going on,
Yeah.
towards the end of the 90s or early noughties, because I mean we had the whole ERP thing, we kind of dominated, and then we had the portal era, and for a while I got
Mm.
involved in a portal conference in the US, which we kind of fell into by accident because we were trying to find a um, effectively like a catalog or for BI reports, and we spun into the whole portal thing because
Interesting.
that kicked off wanting to not know about BI reports, but documents and everything else,
Yeah.
and actually that was a good deviation because that took me into enterprise architecture
Mhm.
and business process management, everything like that, and and which is formed very much. It's all been part of enterprise architecture, but now when you look at data and analytics, this is right in the center of an enterprise
Mhm.
architecture nowadays. And so, kind of having gone through all of that, has certainly helped me in these later years. When you look at integrating with what people are trying to do nowadays, which is
Right.
not only produce all of these models and AI bots and everything else, but integrate it into all of the apps and processes that they've already got out there.
Sure.
So yeah, it's been a incredible journey.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I was asking about the past, because I think you might have one of the, I think, the longest ranging perspectives of anyone I've talked to, in terms of just the being there from sort of the beginning of the data uh, industry through through its creation. Now you're an analyst, right? And we'll talk about the trends right now. But I was kind of like weaving. It seems like you have a very unique perspective to sort of look back and understand. Okay, so like what's noise, what's maybe not so noisy, what adds value, maybe what's
Yeah, I would say
new. So,
definitely, it's always the case, or has always been the case often, that customers are some way behind where the hype is.
mhm.
Although there's definitely been a few times in the last year or two where I've definitely seen customer requirements ahead of where the technology
Oh,
is.
interesting.
And and albeit not in all cases generally, but for example, the whole idea around data products, I think, was there was appetite for that before data mesh hit hit the scene, so to speak. But there was definitely appetite for that because it was taking far too long for people to engineer data, and
Mm,
plus the amount of reinvention going on because there's no industry standard to share metadata between tools, and so people
mhm.
using one tool wouldn't know what's going on in other tools, and most companies had a range of different tools going on around the enterprise, and so the result is that you know people sort of living within their sort of tool set, they'd certainly be aware of what's going on with other folks using the same tool set, but not necessarily outside of that. So,
Mhm.
and I suppose there's been some frustrations there, but you can kind of learn that, um, you know, the lack of a metadata standard is not down to anything technical. That's for sure.
Right.
I mean, that's purely a business decision by software vendors, that
Mhm.
don't want to do it. But
Right.
customers want to do it, but vendors don't. But generally speaking, no, I mean, I think the hype has always been ahead of where customers are at, and also the pace of technology adoption around the world differs.
Mm,
Um,
certainly does.
some parts of Europe, even are further behind other parts of Europe.
Right.
And I think places like UK, or I wouldn't say that far behind the US, even though a lot of
Mhm.
the technology comes out of the US. In some areas like governance and whatnot, there's been a lot of startups come out of Europe
Mhm.
and gone. Often they go to the US and move their HQ there, but yeah, I mean, I still think that a lot of customers, still struggling to get to keep pace. And I think that the faster this gets, the harder it gets for customers to keep pace, because there's no doubt
Mhm.
about it. The speed of technology is getting progressively faster. And I guess I guess that's probably why cloud somehow remains more attractive, because
Mhm.
customers don't want to have to keep, installing and installing until they're kind of crazy, going nuts, right? So
Mhm.
yeah. But no, I mean, I think I've been able to see. Well, I guess the only way I've learned to work out hype and get below it is to dig deep. I mean, I'm the kind of person that has to see under the hood. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't talk really knowledgeably about anything unless I've gone all the way down to the roots of it, and understand it. That then I can make conclusions that I think make sense,
Mhm.
as opposed to just accept everything being blasted at me, right?
Right. Speaking of which, let's talk about the top key trends in data management and analytics. So I
Sure,
think you might
sure.
have some. I have a list in front of me, but I don't think it's yeah.
Yeah.
What are some of the top ones you're seeing right now?
Well, obviously, 2023, much like 2022 was dominated by data mesh. 2023 dominated by generative AI. Kind of turning up everywhere, including all of but not as a not as a out and out replacement for everything else we have. I think it's more, the reason it's got so much attention is because the ability to improve people's productivity and automate things. Um, but I think, it has dominated, and I guess got into the psyche of pretty well, even the guy in the street. In that sense, it's put a spotlight on the whole AI thing.
Mhm.
Um, but I guess because there's been such leapfrogging with large language models, and now, as you saw at Big Data London, we've seen the, first releases, if you like, of technology with generative AI built into it.
Yep.
Then, now we're kind of at the beginning of that curve. I mean,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's probably dominated, but, um, I look upon it as another string to your bow, really, rather than a kind of big replacement for everything you've got.
Yeah. I was writing about this over the weekend because I'm thinking about the I talk to vendors every week, for some reason. I don't know why. They want me to check out their products, and sometimes I'll check them out. But it's definitely the LLM interface is like the one where everybody's going for that. But it seems to me, I don't know how this expands the market, so to speak. I think to your point, it's another quiver, but it's like one of those things where I'm like, this is a bit. This is. I think this is going to be as table stakes as a BI tool having charts. Like just it's another way of interfacing with data, right? So it's
Yeah. I mean, it's more than that. I mean, I think it simplifies user interfaces
yeah.
and obviously allows people to ask natural language queries and stuff like that, which, could easily be voice, kind of Alexa style user interfaces, if you like, which is bound to allow people who perhaps feel a little bit uncomfortable using BI tools, to just, be able to join in and
Hmm.
therefore broaden the user base.
Yep.
And so in that sense, that's true, but that's only looking at it from an end user perspective. I think large language models have a lot to offer in terms of improving development perspective, whether that's IT professionals or
I think it's a
citizen
big one. Hmm.
professional, citizen data engineers or citizen developers, absolutely. I mean, I think that's why we saw it in so many tools,
It was like in every tool that when I was talking
Ah,
about Big
it
Data
it
London,
was,
everybody
it
had
was,
the same thing.
everybody,
Yeah.
yeah. I
Mhm.
mean, whether it was, metadata enrichment to kind of automatically describe things in your catalog, or prompt-based data
Yeah.
engineering, or converting natural language to data quality validation rules, or various other matching rules and whatnot. I mean, there was so many tools, as you say, not just I mean, even natural language SDKs for
Mm.
Python people. You know what I mean? So, so it was almost like the new API is English. You know, so
Mhm.
um, but yeah, I mean, I think the thing that stood out for me is its ability to improve productivity,
Yeah.
and I think it's fair to say that most of the things I see coming out of business executives, I mean, most of their opinions seem to be that's how they're looking at it. You know, they're looking at it,
Yeah.
especially in a tough economy, trying to improve productivity, lower costs, automate things. That's kind of, that's going to be in vogue in a tough economy for
Oh, yeah.
sure.
Yeah. I mean, and hopefully in a, booming economy too,
Oh,
but
100%,
yeah.
100%. Yeah, I mean, because
But
very clearly, the more you automate things, the greater the speed of business, and
yeah.
and potentially, you to scale without increasing your headcount and all those kind of good things. But um, yeah, I mean, I just think it's not, it doesn't draw a line through prescriptive ML or predictive ML or anything like that. It's just as well as. Plus, I
Yeah.
think
Agree.
AI automation, things like um, intelligent document processing and stuff like that,
Yeah.
which have been out there long before generative AI appeared. So, I think they're all still there. It's just that we've now got this as well, and I think there's a whole,
Mhm.
there's clearly some parts of the business where generative AI would be extraordinarily valuable. I mean, marketing would be an obvious
Oh, yeah.
example. I mean, but marketing, sales, or service for that matter, actually. But yeah, I mean, to me, it's another string to the bow.
Mhm. Yep. Exactly. You mentioned an interesting thing earlier, about how data mesh was sort of it was the talk of the town last
Yeah,
year, and now, I mean, you guys had a theater for it at Big Data London, but it was,
we did.
I think, and there's some vendors still talking about it, but it was obvious the elephant in the room. The conversation completely shifted to generative AI. I was actually joking with Shamak about this, that maybe generative AI might have been the best thing that happened to her with her startup, 'cause it just means that she can start focus on building right now instead of, I think, so
Yeah, I mean, data mesh. I think there's still still companies today. I think still tire kicking around that. But I think the biggest issue, or one of the biggest issues with data mesh, isn't so much the concept of data engineering. I think it's the organizational issue, the organizational implications for companies, that are realizing that in order to make that work, that it can't just be a kind of free for all, everybody doing that, because we've been there before, right? I mean,
mhm,
when self-service data prep appeared sort of around about 2013, was that 10 years ago, I guess. So um it was a bit of Wild West. Everybody was grabbing self-service data prep tools, and it was like, well, here you are, you guys figure it out.
right. That worked really
So
well. That worked really well.
well, yeah. I mean, I always use the canteen analogy. When you go for lunch in the canteen, you walk in, expect ready made. You don't expect, if you want chicken for lunch, you don't expect people to walk in and have somebody hand you a raw chicken and some
Yeah.
vegetables and say, "You figure it out." You know what I mean? So, yeah, I kind of felt that that's the way self-service data prep happened. 10 years ago. But I think having seen um, the fact that that can lead to inconsistencies. Um, I think people have learned from that, and I guess the data mesh thing. The one thing I've seen is organizational issues have been a big deal, but there's
Mm,
been a lot of discussion about how should that be. It's not centralized because IT are being outpaced by business demand. It's not their fault. It's just there's not enough central IT data engineers to do everything, and business is outstripping them in terms of demand
mm,
as more and more data sources appear. And then, well, if you swing down the other end of the spectrum and you go completely distributed, with everybody doing their own thing, you can get Wild West. You might get freedom, but you can get chaos.
right.
And I guess what I'm seeing a lot of people looking at is federated now, which is like,
Mm,
well, actually, can we go halfway in the middle and get something that coordinates what's going on across all of these teams, and also seeing people embedding expertise into the teams rather than saying, we're a center of excellence and everybody come and talk to us because we're cool. I mean, I think it's more push the expertise into the teams and upskill everybody. And I think that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a lot of investment in upskilling employees at the moment.
Mm, that's really interesting. And in what ways do you see upskilling happening?
Well, a good example was actually at a big day in London. There was a great presentation by um, a lady from Admiral, I think it was Admiral Insurance Group, where she talked about a data and analytics academy that they
Mm,
created, which had dramatically helped, had made a big difference. In a way, I kind of looked upon it as a move up the maturity curve, moving away from just standalone projects to kind of trying to create a data analytics community.
mm, interesting.
Um, where you can say, okay, well, look, here's the data that's available. If you want this data, here's the tools. You want these tools. If you haven't got skills in the tools, here's the training. And so trying to give people the confidence and the skills to be able to go and do this, and get the basics there. But at the same time, I also think that's the reason why I'm seeing IT professionals being embedded. I mean, that's happened in
Mm,
several of my clients to really good effect.
interesting.
Where other people who they work with in the business teams are learning off the experts, and it's dragging them up to that level as well. And the other thing that experts can do is take complexity away.
Mm,
If there's one thing you want, if you really want to be productive, take complexity away. Don't force it on to people. You know what I mean? So, um, that I think that's also one of the reasons. I mean, there's technical reasons as well, but I think that's also one of the reasons why we've seen people looking for a data and analytics stack. And so I think, as I said in my opening session at Big Data London, we've got you know single vendor data fabric versus modern data stack going on.
mm,
Where I guess smaller groups of vendors have got together and done pre-built integration where they've done some joint development to make their tools work
hmm.
together, versus much bigger players are saying, no, come and use our stack for everything,
Right.
so there's a bit of that going on. And but I do definitely know from my own calls with my own clients, and from doing implementations with a lot of clients. I was in a call quite recently, actually, that they are fed up of tools that don't work together.
Mm,
I mean, really tired of it because and so therefore, if there is not going to be an industry standard to share metadata, then they're quite prepared to say, okay, we're going to rationalize this and we're going
right.
to get to tools that do work together, whether that turns out to be a modern data stack or whether it happens to be a much bigger strategic investment in a single player. Then they're prepared to do that because they've had you know, best of breed tools. People say, "Oh, well, it's more agile." If you go single vendor, it's lock in. But I look at it and I go, "No, it's still lock in if you're best of
Yep.
breed because there's no standard. You can't move stuff." So, um, and that's why I'm also interested in one of the other trends, which I thought we're seeing a lot of data architecture modernization going on.
Mm,
People trying to get rid of silos, where we've had warehousing over here, and then we've had data science over there, and then we've had analytics over here, streaming over there, and they're all being kind of siloed. But yeah, I've been watching the amount of activity this year around open table formats has been
yeah. It's a big
definitely
one.
been, yeah, it is. And I think you may have had people on your show talking about that
Hmm.
already. For me, you've obviously still got proprietary table formats in databases, which is
Hmm.
why we have to port from one database to another, right? But open table formats, the question is really, even though we've seen lots of database vendors support open table formats now, whether that be Iceberg or Delta Lake or Hoodie. I guess the one table announcement, which I saw just
Yeah,
quite recently, I thought was pretty interesting. The
it
fact that
was.
Google Google and Microsoft have kind of jumped on that. I thought, well,
Hmm.
that's kind of interesting. If that works out, that kind of irons out maybe the differences between the three open table formats.
Yep.
But the big question is whether or not we're going to see the database vendors move everything off of proprietary tables onto open tables. And if that was to happen, then it's a battle of the query engines, right? Because
Exactly.
you're
Yep.
right, and then but then you have to think about this because, well, you can say, oh yeah, just put it all on shared data and everything's beautiful. But with generative AI, the one thing I've always wondered about open table formats is how well is it going to stand up to two things. I mean, one is number of concurrent users on BI tools,
Mm.
because people are changing their mind at the speed of thought, and just drag that out, drag that in. If I'm using a popular BI tool, just add this in. Every time you're doing that, it's generating a query. Now, if we're moving to a world of natural language queries where we don't even have to drag anything, we just say, um, type it or say it, then the number of concurrent users is going to go up even more. And so therefore query engines, whether they're the database engines or anything else for that matter, are under even more pressure to handle even more concurrent users
Oh
potentially.
yeah.
And so we've always been focused on, big complex queries, more data, but what about more queries? I mean, so
Hmm.
so to me, I think, there's no real independent benchmarks that I've seen, really looking at scaling out, um, thousands of concurrent users on that kind of table format. Yeah, and then there's the metadata issue. Of course, open table format metadata is not in the same form as proprietary table format metadata, and you have to synchronize one with the other. But I'd like to see a standard there for that.
Hmm.
There's no standard for that, and at the same time, yeah, I guess learning. In my career, I've seen 4 attempts at shared metadata at a standard, and they've all failed. And so I kind of can't see database vendors giving up their metadata anytime soon.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that's such a hard problem to solve?
Oh, it's not a hard problem to solve. I mean, there
Okay.
is plenty of initiatives out there. I mean, you'd have to look at, as you probably know, at Big Data London, I have a great data debate, it's a keynote panel, if you like, of the show. A couple of years back, I had Mandy Chessel on, who's a lead architect of Ageria, which is best part of, I don't know, 5.5 million lines of code.
Yeah.
It's an open source initiative. It's a full Linux Foundation project. Open Lineage is now part of Linux Foundation as well. I don't think, the reason why this hasn't happened is simply because vendors are taking a business decision to be defensive. I mean, if they give up their
Yeah.
metadata by just then somebody else take their metadata and do what they do. So I guess the reason is it's defensive, and whereas customers would love it. It's like the hype at the moment around catalog of catalogs, right? Well,
Mm.
really, if there's no standard, how do you propose to do that? I mean, if a customer's already got, let's say a global business has gone and bought through different parts of their business, maybe different lines of business could have bought multiple different catalogs. Well, then how are you actually going to have a catalog that pulls the metadata from the other ones if there's
Hmm.
no standard? Either a catalog has got to, connect to these other ones and has got to understand their meta model and translate it to theirs, or you know or there's got to be something in the middle, and the Egeria was an attempt to do that. But there's other things out there, open metadata's out there as well. I mean, so there's a number of these, but I guess it's not taken off for the simple reason that it's a business decision. It's nothing to do with technology, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So as much as, yeah, we'd all like I guess you'd all we would. I mean, customers, let's face it, really would love to be able to share metadata between best of breed tools, because then you could get productivity and you wouldn't have to re-enter metadata from one tool into another, and you would save yourself a ton of time. But
Mhm.
given that that's, I mean, every year for the last 6 years, I've asked that question on the panel.
Mm.
Every year I've drawn a blank. Every single year, including
Interesting.
this year, drew a blank. And what it tells me is there's no appetite amongst the vendors
Yeah.
to do it, and there's not enough commercial pressure coming at them, mainly because there are a number of initiatives and not all customers know about all initiatives. And I
Right.
and I think for that reason they're unaware of them,
Mm.
and therefore nothing's dominating. I mean, it's not like I'm getting, I don't know, 100 telcos or 100 banks, all saying we're not buying anything until you guys all do the standard, right? I mean, that's not happening, and because that's not happening, there's not sufficient pressure to get a metadata standard. But nevertheless, I mean, I do think the amount of movement in 2023 on open table formats from other vendors adopting has been really considerable. Much faster,
Yeah.
much more than in 2022. And if that's the case, then yeah, the real question is, will proprietary table formats be given up in favor of open? So that a database engine, all database engines are, it's just their query engine versus somebody else's.
Yeah. And maybe there's a specialized storage format for certain use cases you can pay extra for, but it does seem the
Yeah,
trend is moving towards
I know it
an open
does, and
format.
and
So,
and I mean, I think that helps to pull the. But then the other thing that's gone out the window here, or at least not discussed enough, in my opinion, is data modeling. I mean,
oh, yeah.
like in Europe, we have a lot of people implementing Data Vault, right?
Yeah,
As a
tons.
as a as a data warehouse modeling technique. Of course, most of the world runs on Kimball as a kind of data modeling technique, whether that's data warehouses or data marts. But there's still a growing number of people on Data Vault. And, when you get down to it, and you say, well, exactly how is that going to work? Are people implementing Data Vault, or how does that work on open table formats? Are people designing using that, or what? It's not just throw a bunch of you know files together and create tables over the top, and it's instantly all
Right.
beautiful. I mean, and I think that's why, again, I said in my opening session, that people really need to pay attention to data modeling. I mean, I think
Oh,
it's a
yeah.
critical skill.
I gave a talk at your conference about
You
that.
did.
I did,
You
yeah.
did. And good on you for doing it, because
Yeah.
you're right on about it, because it's such an important thing. But I mean, yeah, I still think it's exciting what's going on with open table formats. It's just quite, and you have seen, you know, data fabric, initiatives around this, but at some point somebody has to talk about data modeling here, and do I build data products
Mhm.
on open table formats and then consume them into, or are we going to see virtual data modeling on top of this? How's that going to
Yeah.
work?
It's a very good question.
Yeah.
It's an interesting notion about data vault too. I was in, Paris actually this weekend and having, dinner with an American friend of mine who's in Paris teaching data vault because he speaks French and knows data vault. So and it was an interesting we had an interesting conversation about data vault, in the sense where it's extremely popular in Europe. I can't say that
Hmm.
it's as popular in the States, although it appears that it's starting to gain a lot more traction here.
Hmm.
But in this, it's interesting if you compare data modeling mentalities in general with Europe versus the States. I think the States, we play a lot more fast and loose here. I would say the kind of the general nature, whether you're talking application development or analytics or whatever, it's more of the absence of data modeling standards that's sort of the norm here. We sort of pay homage to it if we feel like it, but usually not.
Yeah.
So, whereas in Europe, it feels like the things are a lot more formal and rigorous, in terms of data modeling practices. I would say these are almost two different worlds in that sense. And so,
I'd agree. I mean, I think Yeah, and the further you go into Europe, the more rigorous it gets. I
Yeah,
mean, clearly, as you head into Germany, Austria, Switzerland, I mean, they're very
it's hardcore.
hardcore, rigorous, and systematic, but they tend to get systems to last a long time there. I
Yep.
mean, they've kind of they think it out. I mean, they don't make moves until they think it out. I mean,
Mhm.
and whereas I agree what you say. I think U.S. more fast and loose, but at the same time, I think that's also reflective of the fact that I think U.S. companies are more prepared to take risks
Yep, exactly.
and
Yep.
fail and fail fast, so to speak. And I just think that's different cultures, though. I mean, I'm not convinced we're all going to go to one culture. I mean, I think we're always going to see these kind of
Yeah.
things happening.
Yeah.
And some parts of Europe are very slow to adopt. I mean, not all businesses, but in all countries. But I mean, if you
Mhm.
take something like, well, Italy, for example, which has a big place in my heart. I go there very regularly, and I love it. But yeah, well, there's still buildings standing in Rome. They're thousands of years
Yep.
old. So, but I think they're careful. They're very cautious about adoption, and big enterprises in Italy absolutely go for it big time. But I mean, I think generally speaking, though, yeah, there's different paces. People are running at different paces in Europe,
Yeah.
on all of this. But what I'm seeing, generally speaking, is, yeah, can we rationalize these tools? Can we get more of a common software stack to allow people to share metadata, be more productive, use Gen AI and everything else?
Yeah.
And at the same time, can we tear down these silos, get rid of a number of copies of data, and try to build data that's reusable for different analytical workloads? I mean, I guess that's definitely happening, but I guess obviously the other thing that still has been growing for a number of years is governance. You still got to govern it all, and
Yeah.
that's become more and more important, I guess, because well, I've spoken at data governance conferences in the US and in Europe for decades, but I would say, where it started out on data quality, data governance is now data privacy, data access
Mm.
security, retention, sharing, loss prevention, all of it. I mean, and so the kind of umbrella of data governance has got bigger, and more disciplines have come under its control, and so that's caused some reorganizational issues, I think, within companies, and I still think convincing people in business to be more accountable, if you like, for data is it's still a struggle for a lot of organizations, but it's
Mhm.
a lot better than it used to be, and I think you're now seeing much more powerful tooling around than we ever had in the past.
What are some of the key data governance trends you've seen lately?
Well, apart from generative AI going into
Yep.
catalogs, well, you've already seen that, helping with business glossary terms and descriptions of terms. You've seen generative AI and data catalogs to again generate descriptions and things because people don't want to key that in. I do think data catalogs have become absolutely central to data governance programs. For the simple reason that they're helping to discover what's out there automatically. They're also helping to automatically identify sensitive data like PII,
Mm.
which people are obligated to protect, and with your own classification schemes, you can create your own labels and then get um, through I guess reinforcement learning and with human feedback and whatnot, you can get greater and greater automation of catalogs being able to label data as, I don't know, at one extent a trade secret or something, and at the
Mm.
other end of the spectrum, kind of public data or something like that. But I do think data catalogs are fundamentally part of that. and I also believe that integration with catalogs is a critical success factor. I mean, so I think if you're going to go out and buy different best of breed tools around data governance, I would be looking for pre-built integration with some of the other core technologies that you may have
Mm,
already invested in. So if you're already invested in a catalog, I would be looking for other technologies that integrate with it, not just, oh well, that's got its metadata store and that's got its
right.
metadata store. We've come from that background, right? Where we had every tool with its own metadata repository, and now we're trying to either have a common stack with its own metadata repository, which is where you're seeing the single vendor data fabric vendors go. For example, AWS with, with all of its glue catalog, and Microsoft with Purview, and IBM with Watson Knowledge catalog, and Google with Dataplex catalog. I mean, so I kind of think um, that, but the other thing as well is definitely the case that having labeled data and policies being created which are associated with classifications as opposed to being attached to the data. You could attach it to the label, then the label gets attached to the data.
Right.
In a way, it was. I guess you could go all the way back to the beginning of like Hortonworks,
Mm,
where I first saw tag-based policy management with Ranger.
mm,
Um, Way back. I mean, it's a good 9, 10 years ago now. I think.
yeah.
I think that kind of emerged, and then started to see that go right through. But the other big roadblock in the way of data governance is, even if you define all of your policies centrally I don't mean people in the center defining them. I mean people around the enterprise can define them. There will still be some enterprise-wide policies like data privacy, for example, which could be set by a legal department or something like that. It's the enforcement. It's all well and good having policies nicely defined somewhere, but if you can't enforce them, you're still
Right.
sort of screwed. So I think the enforcement piece is the problem, right? Because there's no standard. You can't pass a policy down from one technology to another in an industry standard way. And so we're probably going to see a repetition of what reminds me way back when client server first came out, when we had everybody went kind of client server crazy, and we ended up with all of these servers and no way to manage them. And then
Mm,
we saw the birth of distributed systems management, and then the Tivolis of this world, and emerged, and then we saw software agents being placed on all of these servers in order to be able to manage them from the center. And I think the same architecture will appear for data governance, because there is no industry standard. So therefore, we're going to see governance platforms come out with software agents and do exactly the same as we saw that. Same idea, distributed governance, enforcement being done by agents.
yeah, I read about this a few weeks ago too. I think that it'll be accompanied too by AI agents that will be able to comb through a lot of the unstructured data.
Yeah,
So I think that's sort of the
yeah, and I
what
think as
scales.
well, people defining policies in natural language and being able
Yeah.
to turn that. Yeah, that's definitely going to happen. It's already
Hmm.
happening, I think,
Yeah.
and but it's the enforcement piece,
Yeah.
which is the problem piece for me. I mean, and the other thing which I think is very powerful is if you can discover data and map it to glossary terms. Then if during the discovery of data you can also identify and label things as to how you want to govern them, like this is PII and therefore it's got a
Mhm.
PII label, and then you attach a policy to a PII label. I kind of think that this whole policy based governance is good, but if the piece of physical data gets mapped to a business glossary term, and the physical data has already been labeled PII, then by default the glossary term is PII, which then means you could attach policies at the glossary term and start governing data at the business level rather than physical data names, because we all know what
Mhm.
you know physical data names are like. I mean, plenty of IT professionals have added to the complexity there. Let's just say that, right?
Oh yeah, and not even knowing it either.
You bet. I mean, putting all kinds of acronyms in there and prefixes and suffixes and everything else, and business users haven't got a clue what a lot of that means.
Hmm.
Um, which is why glossaries are so important. But if you could label physical data, then map it to glossary terms, then you know what the labels at the glossary terms are going to be. And if you could attach policies at the glossary level, you can do, policy based, you know, governance at a business term level,
Hmm.
which would be super powerful. I mean, but it does require that, mapping of physical to business terms, but you can't expect people to do that with the amount of data. They can't do it all manually. Not with
No,
the
it's
amount of data people have now. There's far too much of it. I mean, that would be Groundhog Day. I mean, if I had to come in every day and sit there and if I had to sit there and map, every day, and then go home and cook up the following morning, oh, I gotta do it again. You kind of think of people might quit their job rather quickly after that. So yeah, the more
hmm
automation we get out of that, and the good thing is with things like similarity clustering and
yeah.
people labeling, one item, it'll cluster the rest and do the others for you. All of that, I think really helps improve productivity. So I'm kind of confident that, um, we're going to get as a lot of that automated, which, I suppose the holy grail here is I kind of want data governance to be like antivirus, right? I mean, it just kind of runs.
Hmm.
um, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, I hope this is a case though where I think a lot of the automation is going to be key because it seems like there's a scaling problem, right? And as data keeps growing, as you mentioned, and we're talking about unstructured data as well, not just tabular data, which we're used to
100%,
governing. So it's
100%. Yeah,
and the only way this is going to scale is through incorporating AI heuristics, whatever. But
absolutely.
it's
And it's
unmanageable.
same with actions. You mean being
Yeah,
able to detect
yeah,
things, and then, I mean, in a way, when I saw data observability, but I kind of thought, well, what about metadata observability?
mm,
Because like if somebody changes a policy, are they allowed to do that? I mean, like,
right.
there should be some governance process around changing policies, but equally, if new data arrives, which is happening all day long, then you want various automation to take place in order to speed people's ability up to be able to govern
Hmm.
this on a continuous basis. So yeah, I believe AI automation has a huge
Big one.
part to play, big part to play going forward. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this means also that stuff like data governance, data management, it might actually work. So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
'cause it feels like we've been talking about the same stuff for decades. Like, gosh,
Well,
if
it
we could
does,
only
but
make it
I
work,
yeah,
like,
I mean, I kind of think though
so,
we need a governance action framework.
mm,
We need like, well, okay, what are all the governance conditions, and if they occur, what are the actions? I mean,
yeah,
we kind of need to figure that out, and then we can cause the actions to happen automatically. But
for sure.
yeah, I mean, I'm pretty confident the way things are going. Yeah, we're seeing that built out, and AI is going to make a massive stride forward
Yeah.
in helping with that. Yeah.
And the last bit we have, I mean, I kind of want to get your ideas. What are you excited about for 2024?
Well, I think what I am excited about i- is well, there's two things. I mean, I think one is, could we can we automate end to end? What I mean
Mm,
by that is, and we saw first generation data warehouse automation tools some years ago. We've been around a long time, but we're not just doing data warehouse anymore. We're doing graph databases. We're doing data science. We're doing streaming analytics. We're doing data warehouse. I mean, so if you take the data product idea, being able to have producers of data products, and then you have consumers of data products, and then we have catalogs that can discover source data, map it to glossaries, label it, etc., that we just discussed. But if something could plug into those, like generative AI, and potentially generate the pipelines to produce the data products, now you're getting close to almost end-to-end automation. I mean,
yeah.
and so I can kind of definitely I'm excited to think that there's going to be a second generation of automation tool emerge,
Yeah.
and I think it's not just going to be for data warehouse. It's going to be across the board.
Yep.
And 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 I think that's really exciting. The other piece that you know we kind of forget about a little bit is it's like why does lineage always stop at the BI report? I mean,
Exactly.
and I'm kind
Yeah.
of thinking like, well, hold on a second. There's an outcome here for the business is trying to
Right.
achieve this goal, right? So why doesn't lineage stop there?
Hmm.
And so I kind of want to yank on this goal and see this change angle here. I mean,
Hmm.
I want to see, well, what's contributing to this strategic outcome,
Right.
and so in that sense, I kind of think we have to speed up the integration of all that. You got BI, you got machine learning models, whether
Yeah.
that's predictive or prescriptive. Now we got, generative AI, prompt-based approaches as well. We got AI bot, like um, what did I say? Intelligent document processing, for example, which I think is going into Fabric as well. I mean, you're going to see that go in there. Observability is going to go into Fabric. I'm pretty sure about that too. It's already happening. Um, but I kind of think we have to take this last mile and get this loop closed quicker. I
Yeah.
mean, and that's, I mean, for example, one thing I'm excited about at Big Data London. You're gonna think, well, how many citizen developers are there out there that could wire this stuff into the processes and applications that are out there? Because to me, we've got to speed that up. We don't want to be told, oh, it's another 6 months or another. You've built these models, but now we've got to wait another 6 months or 9 months before we get
Right.
it integrated into the apps. Absolutely not. I mean, I just want it like instant. And so I think, in a way, it's kind of really, if you really want full data-driven enterprise, you've got to wire the output of all of these analytical initiatives into the processes and applications that people are using around the enterprise. And that's the piece that I really want to see, a real leap forward in terms of ability to do that. You kind of look at some of the like first product that came into my head just now is Power Automate or something like that, right? With the ability to just kind of plug in these capabilities into processes and whatnot. But it just seems to me that there's an incomplete part of our puzzle here,
Mm.
right? Which is, well, if I really want to maximize contribution to this outcome, then I've got this program of stuff underway, build all these data products, build what I call analytical products. I mean, BI reports, machine learning models, AI bots. These are analytical products, in my opinion. And then it's like, well, which collection of data products and analytical products are associated with this outcome? And then, okay, well, if I now know that, then where do I wire them in order to get everybody to pull on the same rope? And
Hmm.
and and that to me is the piece that's not there yet.
Right.
And we haven't brought those two worlds together. But it doesn't. I mean, that's why I kind of think, well, are we done on metadata when we just think about data assets and BI reports and models and everything? I don't think so. Why don't we see processes being dragged into the metadata scene?
Exactly.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're seeing process mining has been out there for some time now, and I kind of think it's only a matter of time before all of that gets dragged into the metadata scene, and then we're saying, right, this is now we can see how this gets wired together.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely seems like a part of that is due to, I think it's analytics professionals. Maybe we're too focused on the analytical use cases and don't see the broader possibilities that are in
Yeah,
front of us, right? So it's so we still exist very much in a data warehouse world, and I think that
yeah, and I think
beyond it.
I think from a business perspective, to get maximum value out of this, you've got to deploy it everywhere it's needed, which
Yep.
isn't just BI users or I mean, it's get it into the apps and everything else. And I think in fairness, you're seeing SaaS application vendors are already doing this. I
Oh yeah.
mean, Packers application vendors doing this already. So in that sense, you're going to get this whether you like it or not. I
Right.
mean, into those apps. But I just think that getting that job done is because in a way, data and analytics, all of the stuff that we're producing is going to want to underpin every business function, whether it's marketing, sales, service, finance, operations, distribution, HR. You want it everywhere, right? And so for that reason, we've got to figure out precisely how do we wire this into everywhere that's needed in order to be able to get true end-to-end data-driven capability.
I totally agree. I know we're coming up on time as well. It's great having you on the show.
Oh,
Great way to close
thanks,
out
Joe.
the year.
Really appreciate it.
Also, is there anything you want to announce or talk about in terms of some of the fine conferences that you have going on? Or
Well, no, I would just say, yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm doing a lot, as you know, in my education.
yeah,
Got a new data strategy class on building a data strategy for a
that's
data-driven
cool.
enterprise. I've got my input analytics, intelligent apps, and AI automation stuff going now. That's getting a lot of attention, and of course, yeah, data mesh is still a lot of people still looking at it,
Oh yeah,
strangely, not
tons.
necessarily implementing it. So, so yeah, I'm moving on all of those, and so if people are looking on, guidance around any of that,
That's
love
cool.
to talk to them. But also, I mean, if with Big Data London now getting a little bit of attention outside of UK, then if anyone's coming over for that in 2024, I'd love to see you. But and it was great to see you at it. I think it was the first time you were there
Yeah,
this
first
year,
time.
right?
Yeah.
Right, right,
Yep.
right.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's hope we'll see you back in September. And
Yeah. I already marked on my calendar. I didn't know if you were
oh
going to have me back, but I'll certainly come
no,
back. So
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
thank you.
Yeah.
So that'd be a lot
Okay.
of fun. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks to the audience. Sorry I couldn't answer any questions either. I couldn't. LinkedIn has this weird thing where I can't see comments that come into the feed and they don't show up in StreamYard. So everyone had a bunch of questions. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to answer, but maybe in the Mike, if you have some time, maybe go through the chat and just
Yeah, I
chime in or
will.
some stuff.
And by the way, since this is the last one, happy holidays to
Thank you.
everybody, and
Yeah.
hope you have a great time.
Yeah. Happy holidays. Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Talk to you
Okay.
soon. And everyone,
All
yeah,
right.
have a great year. See ya.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, Phil. Bye.
Bye.